What would you do if you woke up and saw a shadow standing at the foot of your bed and it wasn't human? She was warned never to open the door after midnight. She wished she had listened. Elizabeth visited her family's old barn deep in the woods one cold winter, craving a little adventure. Snow had blanketed the earth in a soft, deceptive calm, and the world seemed hushed, as if waiting for her. The barn, half forgotten, half loved, had always called to her imagination. The smell of old wood, the smell of horses long gone, the scattered rust of farming tools. Tonight, she wanted to explore, to feel alive in a place steeped in history, unaware that her curiosity would lead her straight into a nightmare. On the way there, she stopped at a small roadside store. She needed a few groceries, some bread, cheese, and a small bottle of water. The bell above the door tinkled as she stepped inside, echoing in the tiny, dimly lit space. The air smelled faintly of dust and old linoleum. That's when she saw the little girl. Elizabeth didn't recognize her. The girl's skin was pale as snow, her eyes wide and still. She didn't smile, didn't move, just watched Elizabeth with an intensity that made her shiver. As Elizabeth turned to leave, the girl's voice cut through the quiet. Never open the door after midnight. Elizabeth laughed nervously, thinking it was some odd Halloween-esque prank, but the child's stare pierced right through her. And then, as quickly as she had appeared, the girl vanished. No footsteps, no sound, no one else seemed to notice. Elizabeth shook her head, dismissed it as an oddity, and continued toward the barn. But the words lingered, gnawing at the back of her mind like an itch she couldn't scratch. By the time she arrived at the barn, twilight had fallen. Shadows pooled around the building, stretching like dark fingers into the forest. Elizabeth stepped inside. Dust swirled in the weak light from the old lantern she carried. The air smelled of wood, hay, and something faintly metallic. She ran her fingers along the rough boards of the walls. Each creak of the floor sounded louder than it should. Outside, the wind rattled the doors and a distant owl hooted, breaking the silence. She smiled to herself, trying to shake the unease. She placed the groceries on a small table, hung her coat, and explored. The barn had corners she had never noticed before, small spaces where sunlight rarely reached. She lingered in them, imagining stories of her family from decades past. The horses that had once been tethered, the tools her grandfather had used to mend fences. Hours passed. The cold seeped deeper. Her lantern flickered. She decided to rest on a pile of hay, curling up beneath the high ceiling, feeling the barn creak and sigh around her. And as she drifted towards sleep, she heard it. A whisper, so faint she thought she imagined it. Never open the door after midnight. Her heart leapt. The memory of the little girl in the store came rushing back. Elizabeth's eyes snapped open. The barn was dark, shadows dancing across the beams as the wind moaned outside. Her lantern flickered again, then went out entirely. Panic rose, but she told herself it was nothing. Just imagination, just the cold. She tried to sleep, curling deeper into the hay. Then came the sound of something shifting from the far corner of the barn. It wasn't a person, it wasn't a horse, just a dark presence that seemed to pulse with the darkness. She froze, listening. The creak of wood, the soft drip of water somewhere unseen. And then she woke again. But this time, she wasn't in the barn. She was in a room that felt familiar, an alien. The sheets beneath her were damp. The pillows smelled faintly of iron. The walls pulsed, breathing slowly like they were alive. Her chest tightened. The air pressed down on her lungs. In the corner of the room, a door she didn't recognize stood closed, and from behind it came a laugh. Not a stranger's laugh. A voice she knew. Someone she loved. Elizabeth's hands shook as she reached for the knob. Cold. Wet. Like skin. The door groaned open. A hallway stretched before her, endless, lit by weak, flickering bulbs. The floorboards creaked beneath her steps. The walls dripped, and the air grew colder with every breath. In the distance, a figure appeared, flickering, vanishing, closer, closer, closer. By the third flicker, the lights went out. She could hear breathing. When the lights returned, she was standing before her broken grandfather clock, its hands frozen at 4:45, scratched into the wood below the cracked glass. "You have until sunrise." Her pulse raced. She didn't know what it meant, but instinct screamed danger. Behind her, the hallway had transformed. Walls became a forest of dead trees, branches curling like claws. The ground crunched beneath her boots. Bones, not leaves. From the distance, faint singing drifted with children's voices, warped and distorted. The lullaby was hauntingly familiar, one she remembered her mother humming long ago. She froze. Then came a whisper, and it was her own voice. "Wake up before it's too late." The forest melted like wax as bones dissolved. Elizabeth found herself in a long, narrow corridor lined with lockers. The air reeked of mold, chalk, and ink. It was a school, but not any school she had ever known. Footsteps echoed. Children laughed. Her shadow moved strangely, independently of her. It raised its hand, waved, and pointed toward a door at the end of the hall. She walked towards it, trembling in fear, and when she opened it, it was an entirely different world. A carnival. The carousel spun slowly, horses cracked and eyeless. Music warped high and low. Her own voice whispered again, "Don't look behind you." But she did. Faceless figures appeared. One, then 5, then dozens. They whispered names familiar to her, her mother's, her best friend's, and even her own. She tried to cover her ears, but the voices crawled inside anyway. One figure tilted its neck at an unnatural angle, pointing at her. The carnival lights went out. Then Elizabeth woke again, but this time she was back in bed, sheets sticking to her skin. Cold, wet, and with blood. An endless loop had begun as she kept waking to different scenarios. This time, she had woken to a photograph on her pillow of herself, asleep in a room that wasn't hers. She senses that this wasn't her dream anymore, but something else. Suddenly, she saw herself in a church with shattered windows, candles burning without flame. Every pew is empty except one as a hooded figure sat at the far end. Its voice vibrated through her bones. "You don't belong here," it said. As the figure raised its head, she saw no face but only shadows. "I can let you out," it whispered. "But there is a price." Elizabeth asked in a trembling voice. "What price?" The air grew colder. Candles hissed. Then the figure replies, "Your most precious memory." Elizabeth's throat tightened. Her childhood laughter, her mother's smile, the first kiss she remembered, which would vanish forever. The figure waited, silent, watching, but Elizabeth couldn't answer. She ran. Doors burst open, corridors collapsed, shadows screamed, faceless figures reached for her. Hundreds, thousands, and the whispers grew louder. She ran toward a golden light. A voice echoed, "Don't open it." But as she touched the knob, everything went black. Soon after, she was back in her own bed, relieved as morning light poured through the curtains. Birds, sunlight, and fresh air. She laughed. "Just a dream," she said. Then she reached for her phone as she received a new notification. It was a photo of her, asleep, taken from the very foot of her own bed. Time stamp. 1 minute ago. Elizabeth froze. Close to her ear came a whisper. "Sweet dreams, Elizabeth." Was she still dreaming? Or was it all her imagination? Tell me what you think in the comments section. How this story ends would leave you wondering if your entire life has been a dream itself. Click the like and subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss out on part 2. See you in the next video.